Welcome to our program on negotiation and negotiating across cultures. As an executive today, doing business around the globe, not only in your home country, a lot is expected of you to be able to perform your tasks and to be successful for your organization. Demands are increasing all the time for you to be what we call a universal executive. Someone who understands how to do business and how to represent your company or your organization across the globe. A person who is becoming a universal executive today must have certain skills and certain understanding of not only the people that he or she is familiar with, but also business partners, customers, officials, government officials and guests from all walks of life and from all cultures. To be universal or to be international, an executive has to really be confident. You are out there representing your organization, and confidence is one of the most important abilities and skills that you should have when you are doing international business today. I'm sure that as an experienced executive or a senior manager in your company or organization, you have gained a certain level of confidence that allows you to be able to travel and to be able to conduct your business internationally. In the following lessons, we're going to focus on negotiating. And I am certain that your abilities in negotiating are certainly at a good level. But in order to understand how other cultures see negotiation and how other cultures perceive you and the way that you are conducting your business, these things are going to become very important in this program. And we will see how you can polish the skills you already have, how you can become more confident with your skills, and also gain understanding and insights into the way people and businessmen from other cultures conduct business and perceive you. Your core skills need to be carefully in place and sharpened to be able to fulfill your ever-increasing demanding role. So, how do we look at negotiation? I am certain that you do understand that every negotiation is concerned with two things. And the bottom line of anybody conducting negotiations is really to get results. Otherwise, why would you travel halfway around the globe to come back to your home country, to your CEO, without any results? So we have to understand that results are very, very important. Along with results go the development of relationships. And every negotiation, no matter which way you look at it, every negotiation is concerned with relationships as well. You're not just speaking to a piece of cardboard on the other side of the table. You are dealing with people. You are dealing with emotions of people, and you're also looking to develop those relationships that come about from your discussions with those people from other cultures and indeed people from your own country. So we can say that every negotiation is strictly concerned with the results, the bottom line, and the relationships that develop as a result of the discussions and the debate, the bargaining, and the final agreements. So, how can negotiations really be successful? What makes a difference to the way that people negotiate. Up to now, you may have seen several ways of conducting negotiations. You may have a pattern, or you may have your own habits and behaviours as to how you negotiate. Perhaps you've been using those same skills for many, many years in your line of business, and perhaps they do actually bring you results. It could be that sometimes you really do have difficulty negotiating, and you may be looking for ways to improve on the results of those negotiations or discussions. So let's ask, what makes a difference to the way that you can negotiate? And some of the things we're going to discuss here really do have an impact internationally. There are certain expectations that different people have when it comes to sitting down and talking through a contract, or talking through a new business venture, or the new proposal that they would want to develop together. There are certain elements that will make those discussions much more impactful. So, in negotiations, the things that can help you make a difference are, first up, being optimistic. Having that bright attitude, having that certain positive feeling and preparedness to go ahead and to really conduct this negotiation in a very positive way, looking for the light at the end of the tunnel, looking for ways of working together, looking for the end result which is going to bring gain and benefit to both sides. So, to make a difference to your negotiations, it's essential to have an optimistic attitude about yourself when you enter that room or when you enter the meeting place. Optimism can bring a great difference to a negotiation. If you show it, then the other party most likely will naturally be optimistic as well, and therefore you have set the mood in a very optimistic tone to begin the negotiation process. Of course, things are great if they start out this way, and if you can maintain a certain level of optimism throughout the procedures, then this is going to help your negotiations, and it's going to make a difference to the final outcome. What else can make a difference to your negotiation? Have a look at being creative. Creativity about the subject that you are negotiating. Creativity about how you approach the discussions that you're having. Try to become someone who is thinking outside the box more than someone who is always thinking of the same way of doing things. Quite often, the person sitting on the other side of the table will be quite happy if they can see that what you've brought to the table has a different feel about it. If it has something new, something extra, something a little bit more high-powered. When this happens, and particularly in the international arena, international business executives are looking at something that's got that little bit of extra oomph, we say. That's something that stands out and that they can grab hold of and really regard as something highly potential in the negotiation procedures. So bring creativity along to your negotiation. The other thing that will make a difference to the way your procedures go is the mental outlook you have. Whether you are willing to move this procedure along, whether you are open to what the discussions might bring, whether you have a clear view of how things are going to happen. Your mental outlook, the way that you are regarding the whole procedure, and whether it is in a positive light or whether you are closed or negative to what could happen along the way in this procedure. That is going to make a very big difference to the outcome of your discussions. So, in some ways, in the international arena, if you want to have a little bit more impact, then bring along with you a very open mental outlook. That way, the other parties will also become more open. Naturally, they will have their own objectives, their own desires and outcomes that they want. But if you can have a mental outlook that is a very open outlook to the procedures, then this can pave the way for perhaps more increased results that you never expected before. And then it doesn't need to be said, really, that in negotiations, being honest, being straight up front, being as transparent as possible in most instances really does help you. Let people know what you are really thinking. Let people know who you really are. Let people know if something is not quite right and if you really aren't happy with it. Do you know, when you are very honest and straight up, we say, or quite direct like this, particularly in more Western cultures, then that is very highly appreciated. International business executives don't have a lot of time to look behind hidden agendas. And in the international business world, honesty is very high up there, top of the list, as to how to proceed with negotiations. It will set the tone for a very successful outcome, and not only the outcome, but it will set the tone as to how you and that other party will develop relationships together. When people look at you, they get a feeling, they get a sense about the honesty factor. And you are the same, right? When you go into a meeting and when you see the other party, you look at faces and you get a feel, a sixth sense perhaps. You get a feel about the honesty factor that is there. And as the discussions continue and unfold, that feel for the honesty factor becomes more vivid. So if, in a negotiation, honesty becomes top of the list and everything is open and clear, this really will make a difference to the way that you begin your international negotiations. And next up, to make a difference in your negotiation, really do your research and have an intensive knowledge of everybody's needs. Sometimes we feel that because we're so busy, or you are so busy dashing around the globe, perhaps visiting different countries, that the time that you have to really study up and research what is going to happen in the negotiation process is quite limited. And when time becomes a real factor, and time becomes very precious and you begin to feel pressured, then sometimes you may not do the research that you need to do, or read the research that has been given to you to be able to meet the other parties with full knowledge. Now, this is something that you're going to have to say to yourself is absolutely essential. Giving time so you can study up and have the knowledge you need of everything you want, your side wants, and indeed everything that the other parties require. If you walk into a negotiation process and it becomes apparent to the other party that you don't have all that knowledge, then in some ways the other party discounts what they think of your side. Certainly, I know from personal experience, and dealing with people from the United States or the UK or indeed any other culture. Having all the essential knowledge is paramount to beginning to work towards results and to work towards developing those relationships. The other party expects you to have the knowledge. And indeed, you expect the other party to have knowledge of you as well. So we say it's a two-way street. So what makes a difference when you begin the negotiation process? Importantly, what makes a difference in the international arena? All of these elements. Optimism, creativity, your mental outlook, the honesty that you have, and the knowledge that all parties need in order to make this process really a successful one. It's quite easy to say all these things when we go to the negotiating table. But the one thing that I think you need to keep in the back of your mind all the time is that you really need to achieve the goals you have set out for this negotiation process. When you consider the amount of work that it has taken to get this far, to get to this stage of the process, you really have to focus on achieving the goals you have set. And in doing so, there are two things that will help you focus and to achieve those goals. In dealing with other people, you may find that there are areas of misunderstanding, miscommunication, complications may arise because they are perhaps not of the same country that you are. And so you are going to really have to manage the way the other side thinks. You're going to have to help them through the process of how they perceive you and how they understand you and your side. They will be thinking perhaps a little bit differently about you, as you might expect. They will be from another culture, and they will be looking at something in a different way. If they are from your own country, then you've got to first base, let's say. You have got past that first obstacle because you're speaking the same language. But sometimes, actually, even in our own cultures, we have these misperceptions, these misunderstandings. So, in order to achieve your goals, special attention must be paid by you to manage the other side's perceptions of what they think of you. You're going to have to help them see you clearly. You're going to have to understand their different ways. You're going to have insight into whether they're feeling upset about something or whether they're feeling very happy about something or whether they're needing something more. So in order to manage the other side's perceptions, your skills of seeing how other people feel, your skills of having empathy, your skills of regarding other people's desires are going to have to be sharpened. Next up, to achieve your goals, to stay on track and to stay on focus, most likely you will have to use a problem-solving approach. As we go through this program, and as you already understand from your experience as a manager and a senior executive, there are several ways to negotiate. There are several strategies and there are different styles of going through the procedure of negotiation. The one that seems to come out more often than others is using problem-solving techniques, problem-solving approaches to reach a final solution. So these two elements are very, very necessary, and you are really going to have to focus very seriously on them in order to achieve the final goals that you have set. Your organization will expect you to come back with some results. And in order to achieve those results, hopefully you will achieve all of the ones that you have set out. You will achieve the goals that you have targeted. But in order to do that, it's not going to be easy just to walk in and take them home. So what I'm saying is then, really regard these 2 points. Know that you will have to manage the other side. You will have to play a role. You will have to be involved. You will have to listen, and you will have to conduct your speech in a way that manages the other side to get the best result. And you will have to, with your team or with your colleagues, use problem solving. Most likely, your negotiation is not going to be over within 5, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, an hour. It could take much longer than that. And therefore, problem solving is going to be an important part of the process. As you know, many things are negotiable. So when you walk into that meeting room, be prepared to negotiate on almost all things. Price, most definitely, although you have already set your level of price, how you are limited, what you can go up to, etc. But price, of course, can be negotiated. The terms, as you well know, the terms are not set in cement. We like to think they are when we actually prepare for our negotiations, but be prepared. Sometimes the terms are not going to be immediately accepted by the other side, and therefore you may have to correct or you may have to modify your terms in the negotiation process. What is negotiable? We can also say perhaps delivery of your product. What you perceive as a delivery schedule or a delivery time frame as being a very acceptable one may not be acceptable to others. So be prepared to revise perhaps the delivery of your product. Quality? You may say, oh, my product is definitely the highest quality. We don't need to adjust anything. It is as it is. But there may be areas during the process that perhaps some modification has to be made to meet the requirements of the other side. That doesn't mean that the quality changes, but perhaps the way the product is put together as a product to be sold changes. So that is changing perhaps the quality of your product. Service? Maybe there are things that can be modified. It could be that the service structure may not meet the other side's needs, and therefore to have a totally acceptable result, there may be revisions required in the way that you service this particular client or customer. Training? You never know. Sometimes you may have to train up the people who are involved in part of the product you're negotiating. The other party may demand that training issues are met, and that you might have to look at these in giving them the final package. Resources. What is negotiable? Well, sometimes the materials, sometimes the budget, sometimes the people. They may have to be reviewed. There may be things that you need to look at. Perhaps when you originally set your proposal and your information to go to the bargaining table with, perhaps you thought that they would be immediately accepted. But Sometimes this does not happen in reality. So be prepared to negotiate on the resources that you have at hand in order to get this product underway. And of course the scope of what you are presenting may change. It's negotiable. Perhaps you may need to add other areas in there that the customer or your other party requires. Perhaps there is something that comes out of the discussions that you have that will lessen the scope or expand the scope of the subject matter, of the product, of the service you are negotiating. And of course, schedules. Schedules, we like to write them, we like to be prepared, we like to make sure that they are followed because we've done a lot of research in making sure schedules are kept, and schedules are there to bring profit and results, and they're there to keep time in place to deliver product. But sometimes schedules also need to be negotiated. So when we ask the question, what is negotiable? Well, the answer is almost everything. This is how you need to be prepared when you go to the negotiating table. Of course, do your homework, get everything in place. Of course you go prepared with what you actually want to offer. However, when you come up against the other party, when you start to understand them through the discussion process in negotiating, only then do you really have all the accurate information at hand, because that is when you start to see what they really want. It doesn't matter how many emails you have sent across the world or how many phone calls you have had with the other parties for lengthy periods of time. Sometimes perhaps you may have had conference calls that have kept you up all night dealing with another part of the world that has got 8 hours time difference. All of this communication is a great thing, and it's a necessary thing to your negotiation. However, the reality of the whole process will come when you actually sit down together, when you actually look across the table to each other, when you begin to talk, when you begin to have the personal questions thrown at you and passed across the table. That is when the reality of the negotiation will come into being. And that is when you will find that maybe many things that you have placed in your proposal or placed in your information to discuss will be up to be negotiated. That is when you may find that some areas, or maybe a few areas, or maybe only one part of your proposal will have to be negotiated again. So, as I said, what is negotiable? At the end of the day, when it comes to crunch time and the actual discussions take place, maybe everything is negotiable. You certainly have to have your wits about you. We say that you certainly have to be sharp, you have to be aware, you have to be astute, and you have to be prepared for all sorts of things happening that you never expected. Of course, if you know the party beforehand and you've been to the negotiation table several times before, then that's preparing you, because you already have an idea of how they react, how they respond, and how the procedures may take place. You've known the parties before, so then it makes the process a little bit easier in some ways. But if you are meeting the other party for the very first time, then a lot of things can be very unexpected unless you have done a lot of research. But even then, you may find that you have to keep very sharp and focus on the other party so you can get to know them at the very first meeting in order to go through the next steps. Do you know, we say there are sometimes tough negotiators. Tough negotiators means people who are very determined to come away with the results and determined to make sure that perhaps the money their company has spent on them to send them halfway around the world is money well spent. So when they go to the negotiation process, they take a view that they have to be tough, but perhaps tough meaning confident and assertive. So being a tough negotiator means that you will establish a certain control over the negotiation. Control meaning that you will make sure that things stay on track, that things don't get lost in terms of the steps that you are trying to follow. If you are not tough in this regard, you could find that your negotiation takes much, much longer than you expected, and that people begin to go off track, people begin to discuss other subjects that perhaps may not be pertinent to the actual subject. So being a tough negotiator in this regard means that you bring everybody round and back to the main focus. Swing them around again and bring them back to the subject and how the subject should be the focus of the discussion. Control the negotiation, and by controlling, I mean don't let things go off track. Watch the time, bring it round, and bring everybody back to the focal point. Sometimes you can have fun with this, depending on the relationships you have with the other party. If, however, it is a new customer that you are dealing with, then you would be very professional and try to show that you are determined to have the negotiation controlled in a way that it will bring results, a positive result. In order to make sure that the negotiations really go well, tough negotiators stand their ground. This means that in the negotiation, they don't sway too easily unless they are totally convinced. Here, standing your ground means that you are showing, one, that you are in control of the negotiation, and two, that you are determined really to make sure that what you require, what you are wanting, what you are needing is what you're going to take away. You're not going to be flexible unnecessarily. You are not going to be willing to concede very easily unless you are totally convinced. In some international circles and in some cultures, this is seen as being very positive in a negotiation. People like to see that you are firm. People like to see that you know what you want. And it, in some ways, is regarded with respect, that you are very firm about what your company is wanting, what your company requires as the outcome. You are indeed representing an organisation or a company, and therefore to stand your ground and to be committed to the wants and the needs and the outcomes of the company is seen as a very businesslike and very professional way of proceeding with a negotiation. Tough negotiators, are you one? Are you thinking about this as we go along? Because tough negotiators also need to determine what the other sides need in advance. Otherwise, they can't be tough. To know what you're going into is very, very important. To know what it's all about and not walking into a meeting room or a conference room blindfolded is very, very important. If you walk into a discussion wearing a blindfold, meaning not being totally aware and not being totally determined, then you are going to come up against a lot of obstacles and you may come away losing. So tough negotiators, they determine the other side's needs in advance, so everything is absolutely clear. These 3 points about being tough in negotiation will help you in gaining the upper edge, will help you in coming away with the final outcomes that you want. Controlling the negotiation, making sure it doesn't go off track. Standing your ground, making sure you don't go off track and that you are committed. And determining the other side's needs in advance. These are all 3 great points to becoming a tough negotiator who is a negotiator who can be assertive, can represent the company very, very well, and can represent the whole negotiation process very, very expertly. Being a tough negotiator, the others will see you as being a winner. So, in this regard, following these 3 points will bring you towards a successful negotiation. So now let's take a look at some strategies in terms of negotiating. We can say actually that bargaining is probably a common strategy that is used. It's a very competitive strategy. It means that you are competing against the other side to try to get what you want. You want something, they want something, and so you are both competing together to get the best result. In some ways, we call it a win-lose process because really one side comes away winning and one side comes away losing. And so bargaining can be a real dedicated process, and this process is focused on competing interests. You're up against an opponent in this regard. Here, in the bargaining process, you may sit down and bargain for hours without break. You may sit down and argue. One party may have more power in the bargaining process and you want to win. Ideally, if you have more power, then you have the edge. In this process too, the relationship somehow is not really that important. The idea is to come away with the result, with something, with a product, with a price, with a contract, with a deal, with the service conditions you want. The relationship takes second place to the actual product you come away with. Sometimes you may bargain too when you know that the other party is a party that you can't really trust. And let's be honest, you may come up against a party like this in your negotiation deals or your negotiation discussions. So when you are not totally trusting the other party, then you may become a little bit more competitive. You may perhaps not really look at the relationship as being so important, and you may want to come away with the product more so. So this is the kind of strategy you would probably use then. And we can see that actually we bargain almost every day of our lives. We bargain for something. Sometimes the other party may want you to bargain also, by the way. They are coming to you not to sit down and build relationships. They are coming also to get down to the price, to get down to the real nitty-gritty, we say, the real bottom line. After all the talking and the nice introductions and how are you and so forth, they really want to get down in there and go away to their bosses with a product that they want, with the services they want, etc. So when they want to bargain, then obviously you're going to have to adopt that bargaining style as well, that bargaining strategy. You know, sometimes too, bargaining can resolve the simple issues that you're negotiating. Quite often, and you see it in the marketplace, if you're trying to buy something from a vendor and both of you look at each other and you realise that, okay, I know that it's only a simple thing I'm buying, I'll give you this, you take that price, I'll take this price. Sometimes it may take you 2 minutes to negotiate a price, if it is simple. So bargaining is very competitive. And in the negotiation process, this strategy is used quite a lot. However, the thing about bargaining is that the relationship is not that important. And this is something you're going to have to consider. It's something that you're going to have to look at when you're preparing to go to the negotiating table. What is it you want? What are the objectives that you have in mind? What is important as the outcome of this negotiation? Certainly, in your home country, you may go to the negotiation process with this bargaining strategy. But also, be careful when you're in an international business arena. More often than not, the relationships are very, very powerful and very, very important. And so bargaining may not be the best way to approach business negotiations in the international arena. Somewhere along the way, you may have to bargain in part of the procedures to gain concessions or to gain what you require. But most of the time, the relationship in an international arena is a very important thing. So we have bargaining as a competitive way of negotiating. It can be a happy procedure, and it also can be a very unhappy procedure with people losing tempers, arguments building up, people getting emotional, people walking out. Sometimes bargaining can become a very heated debate. But if you exercise control, if you make sure that you have everything in place, if you take control and you ensure that you stand firm and you stand positive, sometimes the arguments can be eliminated. Sometimes you can bring people around and you can get back into a more civil discussion. This is what a tough negotiator needs to remember, that controlling the negotiation process is very, very important so that it can have a positive outcome. In the introduction of this lesson, we talked about having a problem-solving approach as being an important way of conducting a negotiation. And indeed, as you know, being an experienced executive or an experienced senior manager, problem-solving is a very collaborative way of coming to a win-win result. It's a way that you cooperate with the other party. It's a way that you work together to solve issues and to come to a common result, where you share common ways and common concerns of working together and reaching a win-win result. Normally, you can problem solve when you both feel that the power, the level of those in the discussion is equal. When you actually trust the other side. When you trust the other side, you can discuss at length many, many sensitive issues. Many, many important and difficult issues can be discussed when there is trust. So if your relationship is very, very important and you can get along in the discussions and you want a continuing relationship with the other party, then problem solving and sitting together to work things out and come to agreement is the best possible strategy you can use in negotiating. If the other side is adept or is skilled in doing negotiations and solving problems in the process, then of course you match that. You comply, and together both of you work hand in hand so you can discuss and problem solve. If the negotiation is complex, there is no other way that you can come to an outcome without problem solving, without using this strategy. This can take time, of course, but the reward is there at the end. And maybe you need to bring in pizzas, maybe you need to order coffee, maybe you need to order takeaway and stay throughout the night. That's part of the process. If the other side and your side are building relationships together, and it's important you have long-term relationships. If you have mutual trust with each other, if you are good at sitting down and collaborating and going through the very difficult components and technicalities of the subject, then you will come out winning at the end. Both sides will win. Problem solving is definitely an excellent way to negotiate in an international arena.
There are two approaches that are most commonly used in the negotiating process. We bargain our way through it, and we problem solve our way through it. And when you think about it, we actually negotiate many, many times every day of our lives. For example, when you go down to the market or when you go to a store, you are negotiating. Now, you either negotiate by bargaining or you negotiate by trying to reach a solution where you and the vendor are happy about the deal. When you negotiate by bargaining, maybe you just want to buy something to take it home. You want to buy food, you pay a price, you get the price down, and you go home. But when you negotiate, for example, and you spend more time going through the ins and outs, going through different problems, going through different facets of the product, then you're problem solving. We actually negotiate even when we're driving a car. For example, we're turning corners, speeding up to reach our goal, and then we've got to slow down and negotiate a difficult bend in the road. We are negotiating. We're problem solving in that regard. Every day of our lives we are negotiating, and whether we are bargaining our way through it because we need to get a result and we're really not concerned with the relationship, or whether we are problem solving, we're trying to think of the other side, we're trying to think of the person because actually we want to get along with them and have a relationship in the end, then we are adopting different styles. Negotiation can be simple and negotiation can be complex. And I'm sure in your experience, not only in your everyday life, but in your business experience, you have found that some things are not so simple and some things are very, very, very complex. Certainly when you're dealing with international parties, people who are from other cultures, the matter of negotiation starts to get a little bit more complex. And not only because of the actual subject, but because of who they are and the way they think and behave. We're going to touch on the behaviors in the international negotiation arena a little bit later on in this program. So problem solving makes you think, makes you work hard, makes you look closer at things, makes you regard things more deeply. And in any kind of negotiation, no matter what kind of negotiation it is, we really try to reach an agreement using both the cooperative and collaborative way, problem-solving way of negotiating, or we also use the very competitive way, the bargaining way of getting what we want. But in every negotiation, usually there is a conflict. Otherwise, why would we be bargaining? Why would we be problem solving? There usually is a conflict. And that conflict, in some ways, holds people together. That conflict attracts both parties, and therefore we work harder to try to solve or overcome that conflict. Sometimes there is a little bit of confusion or ambiguity about what is on the table or what the solution should be. And when that happens, that's when we all begin to start to talk and start to bargain and air our views. So we can say that to be able to negotiate, first of all, there needs to be a conflict. All right, so we can actually bargain or we can actually problem solve. There needs to be some uncertainty about what the solution is, so we can try to find that solution. And I suppose we can actually view negotiation as a kind of opportunity where we can compromise, where we can together reach a deal that satisfies everybody, a deal that satisfies both you and me, that satisfies both sides. So negotiating is actually a method to come to a final solution. And as you know very well, being an experienced executive or manager, that along the way the negotiation process has many, many parts to it. We can either make it a very simple process or it can become a very complicated one. Therefore, in choosing a strategy, what strategy do you want to take? What is the outcome you want? Do you want to win and gain everything, and the other side you don't really care about, so we say win-lose? Or are you going to come away with less than what you wanted and the other side goes away with more and therefore it's a lose-win? Or are you both going to throw your hands up in the air and both parties are going to lose out totally? Or do both parties want to come away feeling good about the final result? Do both parties want to have benefit that they can work with? And this is what we call win-win. There are lots of strategies that we can take in the negotiating process. The one to aim for, most likely, is a win-win strategy. You want to come away feeling good about what you've just spent days, perhaps, going through. You want to come away feeling good that your company has finally got all the parts of a project that it wants, it's got the price, it's got the delivery terms, it's got the scheduling, it's got everything in place. And also, the other side is very happy with their final outcome as well. You want to come away with both parties feeling good about the final result. And when that happens, both parties have built on their relationships. The relationships are improved. The relationships therefore mean that you can come again and negotiate again and hopefully have a win-win outcome. So we have win-lose, lose-win. Lose-lose, which you absolutely really never want to be there. And we have win-win, the one that you should aim for in negotiating. As you can see from the slide, at the top corner, we have somebody stabbing the other party. Well, this is very much a competing attitude, a strategy where one side is the winner, one side is the loser. That doesn't really build relationships. And when you're doing business in an international sense, when you're dealing with other cultures, and when in this modern time we are looking to extend our business markets into overseas markets, then this kind of strategy is probably not the one to be aiming for. We see at the bottom of the slide a contract being signed. This is what you're aiming for. You want to come home with that contract where everybody agrees and everybody is happy with what they got at the end of the negotiation process. This is the important thing. Win-win is the outcome that you should be looking for. A little bit more about win-win, and I'm sure that you all agree that it promotes stable agreements. And when we say stable, it means that you have cooperated and solved things together. Stability in agreements means that there will be more agreements. So we can say that having stability in an agreement is going to bring long-term gain. Stability is a very important part to win-win. Stability is essential. Win-win brings stability. From stability, if we provide foundation for future dealings through stability, this is ultimate win-win. Foundations for the future. Win-win brings stability. It brings foundations for the future. If we take it one step further, both of these together, stability, stable agreements, bring foundations for the future, for future dealings. It makes it easy to smooth out business problems. So we can say easier to smooth business problems. You can see win-win is what we should aim for, because all of these things are extremely positive, and all of these things will mean that you are building relationships along the way, and that partner or that business customer is going to be there for the long term. So we can say that this win-win is also long term. That's what you're aiming for, isn't it? Long-term customers, long-term business partners who, with you, can have successful negotiations and can build your business. Short-term, of course, short-term does build business, but if you're looking at global business and you're looking at the international community as being your marketplace, then introduce the aim to have win-win negotiations, because the benefits certainly outshine the benefits of bargaining and competing all the time. Stability, a great benefit. Building foundations for the future, another benefit that you need that will certainly determine the success of your long-term investment. Easier to smooth out business problems. This is going to bring more win-win because you are able to talk through the obstacles. A lot of business people get up and walk out of rooms and don't come back. A lot of people in tough negotiations, in really difficult negotiation procedures, get so fed up that they just close the books and walk away and say they're not having anything to do with it anymore. But if you can, through aiming for win-win and build relationships along the way and consider the other party very well, then you will find that the benefits will come through in this way as well. And next time you have to meet that party and discuss future, extra, additional business, it's going to become more of a pleasure than a task. You're going to actually enjoy negotiating. You're going to actually feel better working for the organization that you represent. The outcomes are positive all the way through with win-win. So shaking hands is a very easy thing to do, is it? Do you shake hands, and every time you shake hands, do you come away feeling totally that you have won and the other side has won? You should do. Shaking hands in the international business world is a very important signal to the other side that you have come to an agreement on something. We don't really like to shake hands unless there's absolute meaning and value to it. I think all cultures, when they do shake hands, realize that this is a breakthrough, that this is an important time in the proceedings. To some cultures, and to perhaps Vietnamese culture, shaking hands also means there's a link, there's a bond between you and the other party. It's a way of showing acceptance of each other's commitment to each other, showing acceptance in an internal meeting, and indeed showing acceptance in front of the press, in front of the newspapers, the cameras. So shaking hands is something that cannot be taken lightly. Shaking hands is an important milestone in the negotiation. It's the final resolution and the result. Here, win-win, we say, meets the needs of the other side, as I said before. Both parties come away feeling very, very good about the outcome. And each side is considering the interests of the proposal, the interests of the other party. They're not thinking about their own position as having the upper hand. They're thinking of the interests of each party so things can proceed smoothly. It's not about being, I'm better than you, we're better than that company, we're better than that party, we're bigger than our competitor. It's not about that. It's not about the position. You are interested, genuinely interested in proceeding further. And so that way, win-win is extremely important to aim for. Along the road, though, to achieving win-win, sometimes we find there are obstacles. And it may not be an easy task to go into that negotiating room and come out with win-win. In your experience, I'm sure you've come up against a lot of obstacles. Perhaps the way people regard your culture is an obstacle because they don't know how you're thinking. So, for every single issue that comes up in the negotiation procedures, always ask yourself some questions. Ask yourself along the way, is this matter important to me? Remind yourself, is it important to me? Is what we're actually talking about right now very critical to the process? Is it important to me? Ask yourself as well, as you're going through the procedure, do you value the relationship with the other side? You must make this very clear to yourself that you value that relationship. And if you value that relationship, then you have to have sincerity to following that relationship. And you have to have sincerity to follow through with that relationship. When you go into that room, people can detect very, very quickly whether you are sincere or not, whether you actually value them or not. And sincerity can show on your face. People can see it right here. So sincerity is necessary. When you have sincerity, it can help to build relationships. And in building those relationships, it can build one very important factor that is key to the outcome of the process. Can you guess what that is? I'm sure you can. I'm sure you understand very well that it will build trust. This is also another foundation, a foundation for win-win negotiations. When you build sincerity here, of course you build relationships, and trust is what comes out through that relationship. So ask yourself along the way, in the negotiating process, and before, of course, do you value the relationship of the other side? If you come up with a no, then you have to really examine the strategies you're going to use and why you are there in that process. Also, ask yourself, is time an important factor? Is time necessary to look at? Do you have to think about the time it's going to take to negotiate this process? Do you need a long time? Do you need a short time? How do you regard the time? And are you giving enough time? Always ask yourself these questions as you go through the procedure. It's like giving yourself a personal reminder of how you're going to get to achieve your goals. How are you going to get there along the way? You're aiming for win-win. You have goals, and they have goals. And along the way, you could lapse into a win-lose if you're not careful. If you're not careful, things may go off track unless you bring it round, unless you keep things in control as a very good negotiator. Everybody is aiming to be at the win-win gate. Nobody really wants to lose in most situations. But some people they'll just give up. They'll avoid things, they'll withdraw if things get too tough. So you have to ensure that your goals and those goals of the other party, that you are working together towards those goals. Be considerate of what they're wanting, be considerate of what you're wanting to enable a win-win. There are many things that need to be satisfied when you are closing a deal. And across the world, everybody really needs to follow these three things, because at the end of a deal, they make the whole process all worthwhile. Of course, the needs of the actual proposal or the product or the service all need to be satisfied. And the things that are logical within that. All the things that make that process happen. All the things that need to ensure that the service is delivered. Every single part of what you have negotiated for, all those needs that everybody wants, have to be satisfied. If they're not, then people will walk away with a feeling that the process is unfinished, the process is not quite right. And when that happens, it opens the door for failure of the negotiation. It opens the door for perhaps feelings not being so good amongst the parties. So everything must be satisfied in terms of what one party's needs are and the other party's needs are. And during this process, all of this has to be recorded, of course. As you know, record everything. Make sure everything is kept in order at all times. To close the deal not only requires those logical needs being satisfied, but it requires emotional needs. Whether people are happy, whether people are concerned or uncertain, whether people are over the moon and completely, totally excited about the idea of working together. To close the deal, you have to satisfy what each side wants emotionally. Human beings are quite amazing, and you will find, or you probably are finding in your dealings overseas, that some cultures behave differently when it comes to their emotions. Sometimes you can see their emotions quite easily written on their face and their behavior. But sometimes it's quite difficult to know. It's quite difficult to see what the emotions are. And in closing the deal, you also have to convince the other side that there is no other way that you can change. Sometimes this is part of closing the deal. You have to stand your ground. You have to stand firm. And there will be a time where there's no possibility of you conceding or giving in or making allowances or reviewing something. You have to be able to express in a positive way, in a firm way, in an assertive way, that you have reached your limit or you have reached the bottom line and that there is no further room for negotiation on that point. So in closing the deal, there are 3 things that need to be satisfied or done. Many people say, in the negotiation process, they say, what's in it for them? What's in it for me? What's in it for you? What's in it for me? What do you get out of this? And what am I going to get out of it? Actually, this is the very basics or basis of negotiation. I want something you've got, and you've got something I want. So what's in it for you? What's in it for me? What's in it for them, the other side? What is in it for me, my side? These are things you have to really think about. What am I going to go home away with? At the end of everything, what am I going to get? What is my company going to receive? What is my organization going to come away with? These are worth thinking about all the time. Remind yourself from time to time, what am I going home with? If I'm overseas, what contract can I put in my briefcase, carry with me to the airplane, and go back to my office and show my supervisors, show my marketing director? What can I go home with? What's in it for me? What's in it for them? What will they take away? What will they go home with? Win-win means they go home with something and you go home with something. And both parties are very happy with the result. So in every country around the world, negotiation is going on every day in hundreds of thousands of ways. And in the more difficult negotiation processes, there are a whole lot of steps or a whole lot of things that you have to explore when negotiating. First of all, you need to know your facts. You need to know exactly what is the situation. You have to look for all the details and do the research. The facts are very important. In any simple negotiation, you need to know the facts. It could be a simple negotiation of going to buy a house. If you're buying a house, you need to know the facts of how much you can spend. You need to know how much you might be able to borrow from a bank. You need to know how long a process it will take or how many years it will take to pay off the mortgage. So you have to have facts. In your business negotiations, it's paramount to the preparation of the process. Negotiating, it involves exploring as well, looking for different ways to do things. It involves exploring the other side's issues. It involves exploring new creative ideas, new options. It involves also looking at resistance that builds up. Perhaps you begin to resist and the other side begins to resist. It will involve a certain amount of resistance. You know, not everybody is automatically going to agree to what you want. And likewise, neither are you. So when that happens, we begin to resist. We throw up a wall that resists easy agreement. And we begin to argue or discuss or ask questions. So the negotiation process involves these things. Finding the facts, absolutely necessary. Exploring different ways of doing things, looking at other methods, opening your mind. It involves resistance, and you will have to be prepared for that. You will meet resistance, and indeed you will give it. You may also have to reformulate your strategies. Throughout the process, something may happen that will cause you to sit and rework how you're going to approach the next part of the proposal. Always be prepared to reformulate. Of course, go in there with certain strategies in mind, but reformulate if the need arises, if the situation makes it important that you have to rework your strategy. Negotiation, as you well know in your experience, will involve bargaining, and sometimes not soft bargaining, but hard bargaining. Hard bargaining, arguments, discussions, heated debates. Sometimes people will use dirty tactics. They will try to bluff you. They will try to trick you or deceive you. So hard bargaining is where you as a negotiator need to stand firm and you need to be in control. And problem solving is also involved in the negotiation process. Talking things through, of course, maybe arguing or maybe debating or having hot discussions, but in a controlled way, in a positive and collaborative way, where you're both working for the same end. There's a difference between hard bargaining and having discussions where you're not really concerned about each other, and problem solving and having discussions where you are concerned about each other and working towards things together, collaborating together. There is a big difference. As you go through this process, you then come up to the agreement stage, and this is a very important part of the process, where you finally agree, and then things get written down on paper, and then all the terms and all the pricings and all the structures and schedules, etc., are all put into place. This is where finally you sign on the dotted line. You go to your ceremony, you sign up and you have your pictures taken. You sit together quietly and you sign a contract without any fuss. Agreements signed can be made in different ways. It's up to each party. But the agreement is the climax of the negotiating process. This is what you're aiming for, that final acceptance, written confirmation that both sides have win-win. Next, the process involves follow-up. Walking away and saying goodbye and finishing everything, that's not the beginning of your relationship together as a result of the contract that you negotiated. Now it's time to follow up. Follow up how things went. Follow up what you can do better next time. Follow up if things are needed. Extra things may be needed that you agreed on. Follow up. Never leave things quiet or leave things alone and don't act on them. Part of your role is to follow up. When you've come back from your long trip away and that agreement signed, then you must follow up. And finally, we call it autopsy. Autopsy is taking a look back at the process you went through. Taking a look and seeing how things could have been perhaps smoother, or seeing how your information could have been more thorough. An autopsy is finding out the cause of something that went wrong. So that's what your role is, and that's what the negotiating process involves as well. Not only the final agreement and everybody feeling happy and having their photos taken, but also coming back and looking at how you can make it better. This is your duty as an executive and as a senior manager. And you will find that if you do this after each negotiation, then the negotiations will get better and better and better. And your skills with your partners in your home country and also your partners across the globe, your skills will only improve and make for more successful negotiations. I'd like to take you through, in the final part of this lesson, the styles that we adopt actually when we do negotiate, when we are discussing and debating and talking about things. And you will fall into one predominant style, and perhaps you will have a secondary style as well. And let's have a look at this and see how you can see yourself. We have in the negotiation, of course, people who ask questions and people who command and tell, who are not really interested in asking so much. They think they know everything. So we see on the sides we have the vertical line where it says asks. On the other side we have tells. Okay, so there is a difference in the styles. You adopt an asking approach or you adopt a telling approach. We also see across the line at the top the word control, and at the bottom we have the word shows. You can either be more showing and displaying and open, or you can be more of a controller of the whole negotiation. Inside the box, we have non-assertive and we have assertive behavior. And on the vertical line, we have non-responsive and responsive. So basically, if we look at this grid, we can see that there are certain behaviors that will come from each different style. Some behaviors, as I've just explained to you, will be stronger than others. We see we have the thinker style in the top left hand corner of the grid. The thinker style, well, the name thinker implies that this person actually is a very thorough, details kind of person. This person really looks at the principles and the details of something, and they think quite seriously, and they think for quite a while about certain issues. The person who is a thinker tends to be quite accurate because they do take time to go through things. They want to spend their time to be accurate because that's what is important to them, and that's their predominant way of approaching anything. They are always full of paperwork, full of research, full of information. They have documents in hand, and they approach a negotiation with every single bit of evidence they can, every single bit of information they can. This is their style. Their priority, we could say, is that they wish to be extremely accurate. They don't want to miss one little thing. That's how they approach a situation, and they have all the facts, all the figures in place. This kind of person tends to ask a lot, asks questions, wants to know because he wants to check the information. He wants to be sure of the information. So we have the thinker style. They tend to be rather quiet. They're not so assertive. They would prefer to listen, wait, and think. And also they tend to have more of a controlled feeling about them because they've got the facts and they've got the figures. So the thinker approaches a negotiation in this way. Across the other side, we have the Assertive Style. Here, we see that this person is very much concerned with the objectives, very much concerned with the goals, and making sure that everything is kept on track and everything is completed, that action is taken to be able to reach solutions. They tend to be a controlling kind of person. They like to be in charge, and they are a very efficient kind of person when dealing with negotiations. They will make sure things are in place. They will make sure things are obtained, things are done. The asserter doesn't like to waste time. They like to use time very efficiently. So you'll find that this kind of person is very much a take charge and in some ways likes to say things, likes to give the information, likes to assert themselves in a negotiation meeting. They won't provide you with reams of facts and figures that don't really matter. They will only want to look at the essentials. They don't want to clutter the process with unnecessary information. They're interested only with essentials. So their priority is to be in charge. They like to be heard, they like to speak, and they like to be in charge. Next, we come down on the left-hand side to the pleaser style. A pleaser here is someone who wishes to please, we can say. So their focus is on the relationships, making sure that the relationships in the negotiation process are kept at a good level, that there is harmony, there is discussion, of course, but they still want to maintain good relations with the other party. They will find time to talk to people. You will find that the pleaser will be the one who will go around and say hello to everybody in a longer way than the other thinker or asserter. The pleaser will make sure that everybody is taken care of well, that everybody's heard, that the pleaser will ensure that the way the business is conducted is at a personal level and in a very positive way, in a very convivial way, where people can discuss openly and fairly the issues. And also, the pleaser tries to commit their personal assurance that things are what they are. There's a lot of trust involved here with the pleaser style. The pleaser's priority is to find acceptance with the other party, to ensure that sincerity is there, that the relations are smooth, and that the trust is there also. That is the priority. On the other side of the grid, we find that we have the expressor style. And this is perhaps your more creative, extroverted kind of person who likes to look into the future, who focuses on things that can happen past what is happening now. Someone who is looking at how both parties can move together and how, as a result of these negotiations, that they can obtain even further things later in their relationship. The expressor is a good listener. They will listen closely, and through the listening they will be creating in their own mind ideas of how things can progress in the future so the relationships can be great. The expressor likes to provide ways that can bring the parties together, ways of, and incentives, ways of how things can be better. They would like to be recognized by the other side as being a provider of new things, of the new dreams. And the expressor is actually a very positive kind of person in the negotiation. Their style is that they like to show and not control as much. They like to express and also along the way respond to the other party's needs. In the negotiation process, we all display certain characteristics. Maybe you find that you are one of these characteristics. And you might be a thinker, you might be an asserter, you may be a pleaser or an expresser. There are many other terms used for these kinds of styles. I'm sure in your experience now you know how you behave in a negotiation. You can detect what your kind of style is. You may find that you use one predominantly and add another as well, or that the situation will compel you to take on a different style. The most important thing you can do when you are negotiating, not only here at home, but when you are negotiating with other cultures, is to first of all know yourself. Know how you conduct negotiations yourself. Know the kinds of behaviors you have. Know whether you are, for example, an asserter. When you know that, then you know what you have to watch out for when you are conducting business with other cultures. Other cultures, for example, may think that an assertive style is a little bit too overbearing. So if you know that this is your style and that you're going to a country where your style may need to be honed down a little bit, then this is very good for you. This is how you can build on your skills. In the next lessons, we are going to look more deeply into the different cultures and the way they perceive the different styles that you may have. You will see how they manage and their perception of behaviors. And so when you begin to understand yourself, you will be able to understand more deeply how you can conduct your business negotiations more effectively. So take some time from now until the next lesson to go through and think of how you negotiate. What kind of styles come out in the front of your mind as to when you negotiate. And I will see you in the next lessons when we have further discussions on how to negotiate and how to negotiate across cultures. Thank you for listening.